Rock Creek Park, Washington, D.C. October 9th, 1987. At 0718 hours, a man in a gray raincoat sets a grocery bag by a footbridge and slips a film canister under the rail. The canister isn't trash. It's a dead drop, and the CIA team watching thinks they're about to catch a Russian courier. They're wrong. The hand on that canister belongs to Nightfall, a senior CIA officer who has been feeding the KGB for 17 years. At least 23 Western agents died because of what he passed. Catch him now, or the betrayal goes dark again. This is Operation Nightfall. Nightfall isn't introduced as a villain. He's introduced as a problem the CIA couldn't solve. He's the kind of officer who blends into hallways and briefings. Competent, trusted, forgettable on purpose. The agency doesn't discover him through detective work or brilliant analysis. They discover him because the bodies pile high enough that silence becomes impossible. In October 1970, he makes a decision that feels small in the moment and catastrophic in history. He begins a private relationship with Soviet intelligence that will outlive presidents, wars, and entire station teams. The relationship starts not with ideology, but with access. Nightfall holds a mid-level position in the Directorate of Operations, the CIA's clandestine service branch. His desk processes reporting cables from behind the Iron Curtain. He sees source identifiers, handler notes, and operational summaries before most officers know the intelligence exists. He learns early that the most valuable secrets aren't in safes. They're in routing slips, source summaries, and eyes-only cable traffic that tell you who is talking and how they're being protected. His defining skill, in one sentence: he knows how to move information through a bureaucracy without leaving a story behind. He doesn't photograph documents in dark offices or smuggle files past security checkpoints. He memorizes. He notes patterns. He waits until information becomes old enough that its absence won't trigger an audit, then reconstructs it from memory during what looks like routine contact with Soviet handlers. The Tradecraft is invisible because it mimics legitimate work. An officer reviewing past cases for lessons learned isn't suspicious. An officer double-checking source protection protocols after a compromise isn't unusual. Nightfall hides inside competence. Over the next 17 years, he rotates through the places that matter. Langley headquarters first, where he builds his reputation as reliable and thorough. Then, a posting tied to the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, where he has front-row access to Soviet counterintelligence patterns and learns which sources the KGB fears most. Later, a NATO liaison role in Europe, where Allied reporting flows like a river, and every member nation shares intelligence under the assumption that compartmentation keeps secrets safe. Every new desk is a new map of what to steal. Every rotation expands his access without expanding suspicion. By 1978, sources behind the Iron Curtain start dying in a pattern that feels impossible. Operations collapse not through bad luck, but through precision. Soviet counterintelligence arrests CIA assets within weeks of their activation. A penetration of the Polish Military Intelligence Service vanishes 48 hours after his first secure communication. A scientist in East Germany who provided rocket telemetry data is executed 3 months after his CIA handler files a contact report. The KGB doesn't just catch sources. They catch them at the exact moment when intervention does maximum damage, as if they're reading the operational calendar. The CIA's doctrine is simple on paper. Compartmentation. Limit who knows what, so a leak can't sink everything. Nightfall turns that logic against them. Because he sits at junction points, he doesn't need everything. He only needs the parts that connect the puzzle. A source identifier here, a travel schedule there, a handler's real name buried in an admin memo. Soviet intelligence receives fragments, but fragments arranged in sequence become a map. The agency response is grinding and desperate. The mole hunt begins in earnest in 1979, after a defector from Soviet intelligence provides fragmentary evidence that the KGB has a source inside CIA headquarters. The defector can't name Nightfall. He doesn't know the American's identity. But he describes the quality of intelligence Moscow receives. Too current, too specific, too operational to come from technical intercepts or casual observation. Someone inside Langley is reading the mail. Counterintelligence begins with the assumption that the mole is mid-level, probably recruited during an overseas posting, likely motivated by money or ideology. They're wrong on all counts, but the assumption shapes the investigation. Over 12 years, more than 400 personnel undergo expanded polygraph examinations. The questions are blunt. Have you had unauthorized contact with foreign intelligence services? Have you disclosed classified information to unauthorized persons? Have you accepted money or gifts in exchange for information? The polygraphs catch minor security violations, personal indiscretions, and psychological instability. But they don't catch Nightfall. He passes every examination. His physiological responses show no deception because he believes, at the level where polygraphs measure truth, that he's more loyal to intelligence work than to any single country. The machine can't detect that kind of reasoning. The investigation expands across 9 countries. Audit teams review financial records, travel logs, and communication patterns for officers with access to compromised operations. Surveillance teams follow suspects through European capitals, watching for dead drops, brush passes, or signal sites. Nothing produces actionable leads. Nightfall remains invisible, not because he's lucky, but because he's patient. He doesn't meet handlers on predictable schedules. He doesn't use the same communication methods twice in sequence. He varies his approach based on operational tempo, sometimes going months without contact when security reviews intensify. By 1985, the CIA faces a truth nobody wants to say out loud. The leak may be senior. The leak may be protected by rank and reputation. The leak may still be in the building, watching the investigation, adjusting behavior to stay ahead of detection. Counterintelligence shifts strategy. They stop trying to find him through evidence. They start trying to make him move. The trap requires precision. A master trader doesn't take risks for small rewards. Money alone isn't enough. Nightfall has been paid over the years, but the amounts are modest compared to the intelligence value he provides. The real currency he values is safety, control, the ability to dictate when and how contact happens. Counterintelligence needs to create a scenario where safety requires action, where inaction becomes more dangerous than exposure. The architecture begins with a suspect box. Analysts use access logs, travel timing, and operational compartmentation to identify officers who could have known specific source identifiers for compromised operations. The box isn't small. It contains 47 names, but it's manageable, and every officer inside it becomes a target of intensified scrutiny. Financial audits go deeper. Surveillance becomes more persistent. Polygraph questions become more focused. The pressure is calibrated to create stress without triggering panic. Then comes the canary. Counterintelligence crafts a classified intelligence packet with unique phrasing and a traceable routing path. The packet claims that CIA has recruited a high-value source inside the KGB's first chief directorate, the Foreign Intelligence Branch. The source allegedly has access to active measures planning and penetration operations targeting Western services. The packet includes enough operational detail to sound legitimate. A cryptonym, a communication plan, a handler assignment. None of it is real. But if the KGB receives this information, they'll act. They'll search for the non-existent source. and the search itself will confirm that the leak is active. The packet is shown to a tiny circle of officers who match the access pattern for previous compromises. 15 names. Nightfall is one of them. The distribution is carefully logged. Each officer receives the packet in a controlled setting with witnesses present. The timing of each viewing is recorded. If the information surfaces in Moscow, counterintelligence will know exactly when the leak occurred and who had access in that window. The second element is surveillance infrastructure built around a dead drop site. The site is chosen for tactical reasons. Rock Creek Park offers natural cover, multiple entry and exit routes, and enough civilian traffic to provide plausible deniability for anyone visiting. But it's also isolated enough that surveillance teams can establish observation points without obvious presence. The specific location is a footbridge over a drainage culvert, accessible from Beach Drive. The bridge has no strategic significance. It's simply a place where an object can be left and retrieved without witnesses. Counterintelligence establishes a signal protocol tied to a 2-inch chalk mark on a public fixture near the park entrance. The mark is simple, deniable, and visible at a glance. Presence of the mark means the site is under surveillance and contact should be aborted. Absence of the mark means the site has been cleared and communication can proceed. The protocol is standard KGB Tradecraft, which means Nightfall will recognize it and trust it. The team structure is compartmented. A CIA counterintelligence lead manages the operation and controls information flow. An FBI support cell provides arrest authority because arresting a CIA officer requires federal law enforcement jurisdiction. Technical specialists handle photo and audio capture, using equipment that can document the dead drop without visible presence. A surveillance detection team watches for counter-surveillance, because Nightfall will check for tails before approaching the site. Everyone involved understands that one mistake, one visible surveillance unit, one broken radio protocol, ends the operation and sends the mole back underground. During the approach phase, Nightfall experiences what handlers call legend drift. For 17 years, he has maintained two identities: the loyal CIA officer and the controlled Soviet asset. The psychological boundary between them has eroded. He no longer thinks of himself as betraying the agency. He thinks of himself as managing two professional relationships that happen to conflict. When he reviews classified material, he doesn't feel guilt, he feels efficiency. He's processing information for two clients instead of one. The reasoning is pathological, but it's internally consistent, which is why polygraphs fail. In late September 1987, Nightfall receives access to the canary packet. He reads it during a routine briefing at Langley headquarters. The briefing is mundane, covering recent intelligence developments in Soviet operations. The packet on the KGB source is presented as an example of successful recruitment tradecraft. Nightfall recognizes immediately that the source, if real, represents a catastrophic threat to Soviet intelligence. The kind of threat that would trigger a massive internal investigation and potentially expose his own relationship with the KGB. He makes his decision in the moment. He will pass the information to his handlers, not because he's ordered to, but because failure to report a penetration of this magnitude would raise questions about his access and reliability. The logic is self-preservation. If the source is real, and he doesn't report it, Moscow will eventually discover the penetration and wonder why their asset inside CIA missed it. If the source is fake and he does report it, the worst outcome is a fruitless search. The calculus favors action, but Nightfall doesn't rush. Rushing creates patterns. He waits 48 hours before signaling his intent to communicate. The delay nearly breaks the operation. Counterintelligence teams maintain surveillance on all 15 officers in the suspect box. Resources are finite. Personnel need rest. Equipment needs maintenance. Every day without movement increases the risk that budget constraints or operational fatigue will force a pullback before the trap closes. The window opens through routine. Nightfall's behavior narrows into a repeatable rhythm. Same commute timing from his residence in suburban Virginia. Same parking habits when he stops for coffee. Same brief pause at a traffic overlook where he can scan his surroundings without looking like he's scanning. Surveillance analysts identify a safe pocket of time. Early morning, between 0600 and 0730 hours, when fewer civilians are present and the park's movement is easier to read. On October 8th, at 0655 hours, the chalk mark is absent from the signal site. The message is clear. The dead drop is active. Nightfall can proceed. October 9th, 1987. Rock Creek Park. The execution is quiet until it isn't. 0600 hours. Counterintelligence teams are in position. 3 surveillance vehicles are staged at intervals along Beach Drive, positioned to look like early morning commuters or maintenance workers. None of the vehicles have government plates. None of the occupants wear tactical gear. They're dressed like joggers, bird watchers, or city employees checking drainage systems. The cameras are hidden in thermoses, backpacks, and clipboard cases. Radios stay cold. No transmissions until the act is completed, because radio traffic can be detected and Nightfall is trained to recognize surveillance signatures. The observation post is established in a maintenance shed 60 meters from the footbridge. 2 technical specialists operate long-lens cameras with telephoto capability sufficient to capture hand movements and container details from across the ravine. A 3rd specialist monitors audio equipment, though the expectation is that Nightfall will remain silent during the drop. The shed was scouted 2 weeks prior and determined to offer clear sight lines without obvious vantage points that a counter-surveillance sweep would check. 0645 hours. The FBI arrest team arrives at a staging area 1 kilometer south of the drop site. 4 agents, armed but with weapons concealed under civilian clothing. Their role is narrow. Wait for confirmation that the drop has occurred, then move on the subject before he exits the park. The arrest will be low profile. No sirens, no lights, no public spectacle. The CIA wants evidence, not headlines. 0700 hours. The park is quiet. A few joggers pass through. A man walks his dog along the footpath. None of them are part of the operation. Their presence is accidental but useful. It provides cover, makes the environment look normal. Nightfall will be scanning for signs that the park is too empty or too controlled. Normalcy is camouflage. 0712 hours. A vehicle matching the suspect profile enters the park perimeter off Beach Drive. The license plate is logged. The vehicle is a mid-sized sedan, dark blue, registered to an address in Arlington. The driver is alone. Surveillance teams confirm identity through windshield observation. Nightfall, wearing a gray raincoat, no visible briefcase or operational gear. He drives slowly, well below the posted speed limit. He's checking mirrors, watching for following vehicles. A trailing surveillance unit peels away so the tail doesn't look like a tail. The remaining teams maintain loose contact, using natural terrain and traffic flow to avoid detection. 0715 hours. Nightfall parks near a hiking trail access point. He doesn't exit immediately. He sits in the vehicle for 90 seconds, watching the mirrors, scanning the tree line. This is Tradecraft. He's looking for the things that don't belong. A parked car with steamed windows, a pedestrian who stops moving when he stops moving, a maintenance vehicle in a location that doesn't require maintenance. He sees none of these things because the surveillance teams are positioned beyond his natural sight lines and the cameras are passive, emitting no electronic signature. 0717 hours. He exits the vehicle carrying a grocery bag from a local supermarket chain. The bag is wrinkled and used, suggesting he brought it from home rather than purchasing it en route. This is deliberate. A new bag would stand out in a park setting. A used grocery bag is mundane, something a person might carry while picking up litter or transporting personal items. Inside the bag is the film canister containing photographed summaries of the canary packet. He walks toward the footbridge. His pace is casual, unhurried. He does not look around continuously. Overvigilance attracts attention. Instead, he uses peripheral vision and natural head movements to maintain situational awareness. He's performed dead drops before, dozens of times over 17 years, and the repetition has created muscle memory. His body knows how to move through a compromised scenario without telegraphing intent. 0718 hours. Nightfall reaches the footbridge. He pauses, bends down as if tying a shoe or adjusting the grocery bag. The motion is smooth, practiced. His hand moves to the underside of the bridge rail and places the film canister in a pre-identified location, a small ledge where the rail support meets the footbridge decking. The canister is black, roughly the size of a lipstick tube, designed to blend with the weathered wood and metal. If a civilian stumbles upon it, it looks like debris. If a Soviet courier retrieves it, the contents are immediately recognizable. The critical tradecraft at the moment isn't fancy. It's minimal movement, maximum deniability. He uses a container that looks like trash, placed where any passerby could claim it's nothing. The sea exploits one vulnerability: Nightfall's need for confirmation. He doesn't just drop and walk away. He checks. His eyes return to the canister position, a micro pause, a fractional head turn to verify placement. That second glance, that momentary break in the casual pedestrian rhythm, gives the surveillance team what they need. Intent is captured. Behavior is recorded. The legal threshold for espionage is crossed. The long lens cameras capture 12 frames in that moment. Each frame shows hand position, canister placement, and facial profile. The images are date-stamped and logged with GPS coordinates. The audio equipment picks up ambient sound, but no speech. Nightfall remains silent. He straightens, adjusts his raincoat, and begins walking back toward his vehicle. His expression is neutral. No visible stress, no furtive glancing. He looks like a man who stopped to tie his shoe and is now continuing his morning walk. 0719 hours. The arrest team receives confirmation via encrypted radio burst. 3 words. Package is placed. The FBI agents start their vehicles and begin converging on the park. They approach from 2 directions, blocking both likely exit routes from the parking area where Nightfall left his sedan. The timing is calculated to intercept him before he reaches the vehicle, but after he's far enough from the drop site that he can't claim he was simply walking past the bridge. 0721 hours. Nightfall reaches his vehicle. He opens the driver's door. The FBI agents exit their vehicles simultaneously, weapons drawn but held low, non-threatening posture. The lead agent identifies himself and issues the command. Federal agents, keep your hands visible. Step away from the vehicle. The words are calm, practiced. No shouting, no escalation. The goal is compliance, not confrontation. Nightfall freezes. His hand is on the doorframe. His face shows no shock, no surprise. Instead, there's something close to resignation. He understands immediately what has happened. The canary packet was bait. The dead drop was observed. The 17-year operation is over. He does not resist. He does not run. He places both hands on the roof of his vehicle and waits for the agents to approach. The arrest is procedural. Handcuffs are applied. Miranda rights are read. Nightfall is placed in the back of an FBI vehicle. No statements are made. No questions are asked. The FBI agents know that anything Nightfall says before legal counsel is present could jeopardize prosecution. The silence is tactical, preserving the integrity of evidence gathered through surveillance rather than interrogation. 07:28 hours. A secondary team secures the dead drop site. The film canister is photographed in place, then retrieved using gloved hands and placed in an evidence bag. Chain of custody is documented with signatures, timestamps, and witness statements. The canister will be analyzed for fingerprints, though Nightfall was careful enough that prints are unlikely. What matters is the content. Photographed pages of the canary packet, complete with the unique phrasing and routing codes that only 15 officers accessed. The evidence links Nightfall directly to the compromise. By 0800 hours, Nightfall is in federal custody at an FBI field office in Washington. The CIA is notified through secure channels. The notification is brief, clinical. Subject apprehended, evidence secured, no media exposure. Inside Langley, the reaction is not celebration, it's exhaustion. 12 years of investigation, 400 polygraphs, 9 country audits. And the answer was someone senior enough to attend operational briefings and boring enough that nobody questioned his presence. The interrogation begins 48 hours later, after Nightfall has legal representation and the initial shock of arrest has settled. The interrogation is not theatrical. No bright lights, no good cop, bad cop routines. Just 2 counterintelligence officers and a stenographer in a conference room, asking questions that have been prepared over months. The questions are specific, focused on access points and transmission methods rather than motivation or ideology. What did you pass? When? To whom? How did you communicate? The answers, when they come, are detailed and unrepentant. Nightfall describes his tradecraft with the same professional detachment he used when briefing colleagues on operational security. He views the interrogation as a professional debrief, not a confession. Over 6 weeks of interviews, the damage assessment takes shape. Nightfall had access to source identifiers for operations across the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, and select Asian targets. He passed summaries of at least 90 operational cables, including agent identities, communication plans, and security protocols. The KGB used this information to dismantle CIA networks in Poland, East Germany, and Czechoslovakia. At least 23 Western intelligence sources were arrested, and the majority were executed. An unknown number of operations were compromised before they began, terminated by Soviet counterintelligence before agents could be activated. The strategic impact goes beyond body count. Nightfall's betrayal forced the CIA to assume that everything passing through certain channels during his tenure was compromised. Operations had to be reconstructed from scratch. Sources had to be re-vetted. Liaison relationships with allied services deteriorated when it became clear that shared intelligence may have been funneled to Moscow. NATO intelligence cooperation, already fragile during the Cold War's final decade, suffered trust deficits that took years to repair. Intercepted communications from KGB archives, obtained after the Soviet Union's collapse, reveal Moscow's assessment of Nightfall's value. One 1984 memo describes him as our most productive source inside the adversary service, providing operational intelligence of the highest strategic importance. The memo notes that Nightfall's reporting allowed the KGB to neutralize multiple hostile penetrations and preserve the integrity of critical assets. In Soviet intelligence terms, Nightfall wasn't just an agent. He was a force multiplier. The CIA's public response is carefully controlled. An official statement released in December 1987 confirms that a senior officer has been arrested on espionage charges. The statement emphasizes that the arrest resulted from vigilant counterintelligence work and cooperation with the FBI. There is no mention of the 12-year mole hunt, the 400 polygraphs, or the near misses where Nightfall evaded detection. The message is crafted to project competence while acknowledging failure. We caught him, but yes, he operated for 17 years. Congressional oversight committees demand briefings. Closed-door sessions in early 1988 review the timeline, the investigative missteps, and the reforms being implemented to prevent future penetrations. Lawmakers ask the obvious questions. How did he pass polygraphs? Why did no financial audit raise flags? What specific compartmentation failures allowed one officer to access so much sensitive reporting? The CIA's responses are technical and defensive, but the underlying admission is clear. The system was designed to catch outside threats, not senior insiders. Nightfall exploited the trust gap that institutional culture creates between operational officers. Allied intelligence services react with public professionalism and private fury. British intelligence had shared operational details on Soviet targets during Nightfall's tenure, assuming CIA compartmentation would protect sources. Several British assets behind the Iron Curtain were compromised. West German intelligence, which coordinated closely with CIA on Eastern European operations, conducts its own internal review to determine whether Nightfall had access to German sources. The review concludes that he likely did, and 2 joint operations are retroactively assessed as compromised. Trust, once broken at this level, doesn't rebuild quickly. Liaison relationships become more guarded, with Allied services implementing additional security protocols before sharing sensitive intelligence with American counterparts. Moscow's response is silence. No official acknowledgement, no diplomatic protest, no media commentary. The KGB understands that confirming Nightfall's relationship with Soviet intelligence would expose Tradecraft methods and potentially compromise other assets still in place. The silence is also strategic. By refusing to engage, Moscow forces the CIA to operate in uncertainty. Was Nightfall the only penetration? Were there others? The doubt is corrosive, feeding paranoia and internal suspicion long after Nightfall is removed from operational access. The trial, conducted in 1988, is partially closed to protect classified information. The evidence presented is overwhelming. Surveillance footage of the dead drop, analysis of the canary packet found in the film canister, testimony from counterintelligence officers who traced access patterns to Nightfall's duty assignments. The defense does not dispute the facts. Instead, it argues mitigation. Nightfall cooperated during interrogation, provided detailed debriefs that helped the CIA assess damage, and expressed remorse for the consequences of his actions. The argument is pragmatic, aimed at avoiding a death sentence rather than securing acquittal. The jury deliberates for 4 hours. The verdict is guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit espionage, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, and acting as an agent of a foreign power. The sentencing phase introduces victim impact statements. Families of executed sources testify about the human cost. A Polish officer's widow describes learning of her husband's arrest and execution. A former East German scientist's daughter explains how her father disappeared in 1979 and was never seen again. The statements are factual, restrained, devastating. Nightfall receives life imprisonment without possibility of parole. He is incarcerated in a federal maximum security facility with restricted communication privileges. He will spend the remainder of his life in administrative segregation, isolated from general population for his own protection and to prevent further intelligence compromise. The sentence satisfies no one. Prosecutors argue that capital punishment would have been appropriate given the body count. Defense attorneys maintain that cooperation merited leniency. The families of executed sources feel that no sentence can restore what was taken. The strategic reforms implemented after Nightfall's arrest reshape CIA counterintelligence doctrine. Financial monitoring becomes more aggressive, with automated systems flagging unexplained income, unusual spending patterns, or lifestyle changes inconsistent with salary. Polygraph protocols are revised to include more detailed questions about undisclosed foreign contacts and financial relationships. Compartmentation rules are tightened, limiting the number of officers with access to multiple operational theaters simultaneously. Most significantly, the counterintelligence staff is expanded and given greater authority to challenge senior officers without fear of career retaliation. The message is institutional. Rank no longer provides immunity from scrutiny, but the deeper legacy is psychological. Nightfall changes the fear. For decades, CIA officers were trained to watch for external threats, hostile surveillance, recruitment attempts by foreign services, technical penetrations of secure facilities. Nightfall forces a shift inward. The most dangerous threat isn't out there. It's the colleague who knows where the files live, how approvals work, and how to look bored while history burns. Trust, the currency that makes intelligence services function, becomes conditional. Officers begin watching each other, questioning anomalies, reporting suspicions. The paranoia is necessary, but it corrodes morale. People join intelligence services to fight external enemies, not to investigate their co-workers. For Nightfall himself, the humanizing moment comes through letters written from prison and later released during appeals proceedings. In one letter to his attorney, he describes the psychological split he experienced during his operational years. I convinced myself I was serving a larger truth, that both superpowers were dangerous, that balance required information flow in both directions, that someone needed to act as an equalizer. By the time I understood how delusional that reasoning was, I was already in too deep. The KGB doesn't accept resignations. The letter is self-serving, an attempt to reframe betrayal as ideological error. But it reveals the cognitive architecture that allowed him to operate for 17 years without breaking. He didn't see himself as a traitor. He saw himself as a regulator, managing information asymmetry between rival powers. The logic is pathological, but internally consistent. The moral question resists easy answers. One perspective frames Nightfall as pure evil. He traded lives for control, money, and the psychological satisfaction of deceiving an institution that trusted him. He knew the consequences. Every cable he passed, every source identifier he compromised, was a conscious decision to prioritize his relationship with Soviet intelligence over the safety of agents in the field. The executions weren't abstractions. They were human beings with families who risked everything because they believed the CIA would protect them. Nightfall broke that promise 23 times, and likely more that remain unconfirmed. That calculation, by any moral framework, is indefensible. The alternative perspective doesn't justify Nightfall, but interrogates the system that enabled him. The CIA built the conditions: overtrust in senior officers, rigid hierarchy that discouraged questioning authority, and a culture where raising security concerns about a colleague was treated as disloyalty until bodies forced the question. Nightfall operated for 17 years, not because he was brilliant, but because the institution was structured to trust rank over evidence. 400 polygraphs failed to detect him. Financial audits missed the patterns. Surveillance didn't notice the gaps in his schedule. At what point does institutional failure become complicity? The answer matters because it determines where reform focuses: on individual character or systemic design. The engagement question is deliberate and uncomfortable. If catching a mole means surveilling your own people, polygraphing loyalists, and treating every senior officer as a potential threat, where is the line between security and paranoia? More specifically, who gets to draw that line? In a classified environment where oversight is limited and internal investigations are shielded from external review, counterintelligence has extraordinary power. That power stopped Nightfall. But it also created an environment where innocent officers lived under suspicion for years, where careers were damaged by proximity to investigations, and where the presumption of trust was replaced with the presumption of potential guilt. Was that cost justified? Would you accept that cost if you were the one under surveillance? Nightfall's story is a study in quiet catastrophe. No dramatic shootouts, no high-speed chases, no explosive finales. Just a man in a gray raincoat placing a film canister under a bridge rail while surveillance cameras recorded every movement. The operation succeeded because counterintelligence finally understood that catching a master traitor requires creating a scenario where safety demands action. They made him move. And when he moved, they were watching. The 17 years of betrayal ended in 90 seconds of recorded behavior. That's the paradox of espionage. Years of invisible damage contained in a single visible act. What's your take? Was the paranoia that followed Nightfall's arrest a necessary correction or an overreaction that damaged the agency's operational effectiveness? Drop your perspective in the comments. And if this story made you reconsider what loyalty means in a profession built on deception, hit that like button and share this with someone who thinks they understand how espionage really works.